It looks like we still got folks coming in, but we'll go ahead and get started. As I shared, this is our regular edition of the Coffee Chat with the Superintendent, and we're going to jump right into talking about our health services. In particularly, Stacy, if you go to the next slide, I'm going to talk about COVID-19 and our academic programs. As you know, we provide a traditional in-person program, and when we need to, we go to blended and/or e-learning if necessary. We are currently in the blended model, AB Schedule for secondary 6 through 12, and in-person for our elementary K through 5. We also run a virtual program simultaneously. That program supports students K through 12, and we have roughly 1,000 students in that program at this time. So those are our two options for school that we started out with this year. I'll go on to the next slide. What we ask everyone is to continue with your daily health screenings. Be sure to make sure that you're taking your temperature and answering the questions. All of you should be pretty good at this by now and have it down pat. Remember that if you have a temperature of 100 degrees or higher, or answer yes to any of the questions above, that you need to stay home. So next slide. I think you jumped a slide, or is that correct? Go ahead, next slide. I feel like that's out of order. Am I wrong? No? Okay. All right. Go to the daily. Okay, thank you. So in our current model, if we were in a traditional model, we would be looking at the impact of a positive student. So you can see here, I've shared this before, a blue-headed student there is with less than 6 feet away under the current guidance. That student would contact trace with anyone 3 to 5 feet away. Anyone more than 6 feet away would be fine. The teacher, for example, would be fine in this, and this is in a traditional model. Now, the other model that we use currently in our blended model for the secondary, we're able to social distance a little bit more by being blended, and therefore the number of students impacted by a positive case is cut down significantly. So this graphic gives you the idea of why we utilize the blended model at the secondary level. So next slide. A couple of things to talk about is just our schedule. As of today, we are scheduled to be blended through February 12th. We plan to announce on February 4th what we will do after the 12th. So coming back on the 16th, because remember the 15th is a holiday. So we'll make that decision moving forward. We'll make that decision moving forward and announce that on the 4th. Couple of issues in regards to planning out and why we try to make it at least 2 weeks. We feel that it's best for everyone involved, parents, students, and of course staff, to have a plan in place and announce ahead of time so that people can plan, whether it's setting up care for your students, figuring out your work schedules, and of course, for us, it's about planning academically what we're doing and being able to schedule that out in advance. And unfortunately, as I've shared with all of you, the state continues to do testing, standardized testing, which requires we have to figure out how to schedule around that and make that work. I'll get on my soapbox and say one more time, again, that standardized testing is something that the state could probably save money on by cutting it and putting it back in the classroom instead of wasting millions of dollars on standardized testing. And this is just another example of how we have to adjust our schedules so that we can make room in our education process so that we do all the standardized tests that are required of us. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox. Talking about quarantine procedures for us, the CDC recommends a 14-day quarantine that offers the following alternatives. I'll let, I think at this point, I'm going to let, is it Jason? You're going to take this, you and Amy?
Yeah, I'll start, and Amy
Okay.
definitely jump in and clean up any messes I make. She's good at that. But no, we saw this guidance as well as most of our community did, and we got really excited because we do want our students back as quick as possible. We hate that we have to quarantine students for this length of time when they've just been in close contact. Our problem is, and Stacy, if you'd go to the second slide for me, the reason we've been hesitant to, or the next slide, I'm sorry. There we go. The reason that we felt this was, a little too far. There you go. The reason we were unable to move to this direction right after break is on top of that CDC recommendation, our State Department of Health kind of broke this down into some bullet points of what we'd have to do in the schools if we bring students back. So those 4 days that they'd get back, they'd have to, obviously practicing good hand hygiene is pretty easy. But our concern is the staying at least 6 feet away. As you saw in Dr. Arkanoff's slides, even in the hybrid model, we still have students that we have to contact trace. That number is greatly diminished, but it's still there. And we don't feel like it would be possible to keep students away from other individuals for 6 feet at all times. We also really struggle with lunchtime activities that would require a student to remove their mask to participate. And as you'll see that that grace given by the CDC came with kind of that tie that the students have to wear their face covering at all times. And really it was those 2 bullet points that really hindered our ability to lower this to 10 days. Amy, did I say that right? Is there anything else to add there?
No, that's correct. The other part, I know on the previous slide, it discussed the 7-day option with the test, and the state health department has been very clear in the past 3 weeks since we've come back from break that is not an option for schools or really anybody in the state of Indiana. Obviously, businesses can make their own decisions in regards to that, but the health department's been pretty clear with community spread the way that it is currently, or at least it was the first 3 weeks of the new year, that just clearly is not an option, and they don't want us to follow that. The CDC and the state health department are both still recommending 14 days as the best policy. And so that's, and like you were saying, it is difficult to then try to break this down a little bit more, particularly with the kids, because they do say they want people wearing masks 100% of the time. That means that any of those kids who come back are not going to get breaks. They're not going to be able to take their masks off at recess if they're younger, and things along those lines. It makes lunch a lot more difficult to try to maneuver and figure out how to make that safe for everybody.
Yeah. And I'll also add that Dr. Arkanoff meets with the county superintendents as well as the Johnson County Health Department. It's pretty much a weekly, bi-weekly basis at this point. And when this guidance came down, we all had they had a very hearty conversation about this, and we did push back quite a bit trying to get to the 10-day, but really felt like as a county, and you'll notice the other Johnson County schools are in line with this practice, the county decided that we should stay at the 14 days. So really the three levels of healthcare recommendations that we look at, the county, the state, and the federal government, all three are still recommending that 14 days. And so ultimately we landed there, and we've remained there since.
Great, thank you. I'll jump in here. I know we've got a few questions in regards to some of that topic. I think the first question was, who decides when the middle and high school students return to full-time in person, and that's a collaborative effort between the school board and the administration and the Teachers Association. We do that, and we use the data that we have shared with you on our status page, which I'll get to here in just a minute. So that's a collaborative effort that we work together on. So the school board, the administration, the Teachers Association, we have a conversation, look at data, and of course, in consultation with the county health department, we make that decision of what course of action to take each time. So there was a couple of other questions about the daily screenings, and I'll let one of you jump in on this. It says, if our child has to stay home based on a daily health screening for a few days, at what point will they need a physician's note to return for an excused absence? Who would like to answer that one?
I think right now, you know, if you're taking your child to go get COVID tested in relation to that, COVID absences are coded differently. COVID absences don't actually count against the students if they are quarantined, or if they've tested positive, or if they're out just awaiting test results. So at that point, you know, I think that it just comes down more to if you're keeping your kid out because they have high fevers, you know, they're vomiting, they are not well, you know, I don't know that. I think traditionally it's been, if you've been out past 3 to 5 days, you needed a physician's note upon your return for that to be considered excused. But like I said, if you're going to get COVID tested, if you come back with a negative test or positive test, you know, then that's a COVID related absence, and that actually doesn't even count in the absences for a student.
Thank you, Amy. The next question is, does the quarantining apply in the if the contacts occur when everyone in the room is wearing a mask?
Yes, currently, you know, the masks are definitely the reason why I think we're succeeding in the school setting across the country, where we have kids who are in school. But mask wearing is not taken into account when determining close contact. The CDC has been very clear that the close contact occurs. It doesn't matter whether you're wearing a mask or not. What has been found is that if both parties are wearing a mask, then the likelihood that the other party who is not positive would later become positive is drastically reduced. It's not a guarantee that they won't get sick, but if they do get sick, they probably will have less symptoms because they haven't been able to get as much viral load, because they have been, you know, both protected by wearing masks. But it's still, you know, whether they're wearing masks or not doesn't play into whether they're considered a close contact or not. And I know that can be frustrating for people.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think the next question was, I think I answered that one. Who decides? Shared that one. Let's see. What criteria is being used? Well, I'm going to go into that one in just a moment. So as you can see, the related absences, here's kind of a little bit of history, if you will, for the school district, based on the quarantining procedures and the number of cases. And as you can see, our numbers are trending downward, in particularly when we implemented the blended model at the secondary level. So as you can see, after winter break, we did see a spike, as predicted by many of the experts in that second week. Historically, even our third week would go up, but we've been fortunate this time, that our third week is actually lower than our second week. So that's working out well for us. So then the question is, and we can go to the next slide, is our status, where we're at and how we work to make that decision. So as you can see, here are the metrics that we use. We're currently in stage 2. There's a question on the board there as well. Does the county health department have to approve in person? Yes and no. You know, one of the things is that you don't want to go against the experts, the medical experts, which I am not, and our county health department is. And so if they are recommending that we stay at stage 2, we're probably we're probably going to follow that guidance. They haven't taken a very strong stance in one way or another of telling us, we have to do something. However, they have told us that, it is in their medical opinion that we go blended or we go in person or whatever the case may be. And so we respect that and we follow that. That again is just part of, if you look at the screen, and you'll see here that the transition considerations are a number of points. The county health department is one of those points, along with the state. Of course, the positive cases in our schools and our COVID-related absences. And then the two obvious things are availability of PPE and the ability to clean our schools. So what can trigger some of these things are the absences of staff. When we have a hit to custodial staff, it can be pretty significant, and it can hurt our ability to open up the school. If we end up not having teachers out for so many days due to COVID-related absences, that can hurt. Whether they are quarantined or actually ill can create two different issues as well, which has been the case. We have experienced all of these things, and we've managed it through substitute teaching, through staff filling in. We've had central office staff fill in from everywhere in the classroom to administrative roles in middle school central. Thank you, Mr. Taylor, for being a middle school principal for a week or so. And so we've been, we do what we can to keep the doors as open as much as possible, and the blended is helping in that way. So going on to the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about mental health, and I believe that's some of the questions. There's a lot to be said about the impact on mental health. And, just to remind everyone, as a district, we have been working for quite a few years in mental health, and particularly we, had a big push for a referendum to support our efforts in mental health. Unfortunately, the referendum didn't pass, but as we said during the referendum, that we were going to continue to implement what we could in mental health support every year, as much as we could afford to. It would just take us a lot longer. And so with that, Dr. Long joins us today, and he works with Heather Fosnot to implement the supports for mental health. And I'll let him kind of share, let them both kind of share where we're at and what we're doing in that area to support our students' mental health.
Yeah, I'll start with just kind of an overall picture of where we are, and if there are some more details, Heather can fill in. We have, like Dr. Octonoff mentioned, despite failing the referendum, we've hired a director of mental health and counseling. We've hired 5 additional social worker positions, and we've hired an SEL specialist who are working with our kids. We made a plan to work with our students that are virtual, and also with our, like we have been with our kids that are in person. We have also partnered with Community Health. They're our mental health provider in our school, and we have from them 3 additional therapists and a couple of life skills clinicians that are working with our students as well. So we have a good plan in place, and we're working with our kids. And we realized, we had seen kind of an uptick in mental health issues, like Dr. Octonoff mentioned a few years ago before COVID, and we continue to see those, and we were addressing those as best as we can. And I know there's been some discussion in the community about the mental health of students that aren't in school full time, and I think obviously that's a concern for us, and we think when it's safe, we'd like to have everybody back in school full time, and we'll move towards that. And but that's not going to end our mental health issues. Those will continue for quite some time, we believe anyway. And like Dr. Arkanoff said, I'm not the expert in that, but I know somebody who is, and Heather's on here too. So if there's anything else, Heather, that I've missed or kind of glossed over too much, feel free to kind of fill in the gaps there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point of the pandemic causing an increase of anxiety and depression and suicidality, that's true across the nation of all ages, adults and children. And so that is a huge concern. Obviously, each of the schools have had more of those needs, including our elementaries that have been in person so far this school year. And so we are very aware of the concerns and are working to increase supports to those students. Referrals for our mental health partnership are nearly double what they were last year at this point in time, just starting that second semester. And we're trying to put some other supports in place within each of the buildings.
Heather, that reminds me, I mean, any parent can make a referral to our mental health specialist. So we need to make sure that parents know that if you have concern about your child, you can fill out the paperwork, and we'll have community health, we'll screen them, and if appropriate, we'll set up services for them as well.
Yeah, and your building school counselor or school social worker is the liaison between that building and community and can help with that process. You are also welcome to reach out to me to help with that linkage to community as well.
Great, thank you both. And as we continue on mental health crisis, it's been an issue even before COVID. And as you can tell, the work we've been planning, and unfortunately for Heather, I mean, she came in, and I think 1 month later we were in a global pandemic. So she's picked the ball up running and doing everything she can to work with our staff and our students to get all the services we can to our families. Again, as Dr. Long pointed out, don't hesitate to contact. If you are not sure who, just call your school, talk to your principal, talk to a counselor, and just say you need support, your family needs support, and we will put you in contact with the right folks. So plenty of work going on there in mental health and balancing the two. So the question I always get is, how what's more important, the mental health or COVID-19 and being subjected to getting sick and COVID-19. And it's difficult when you have almost 9,000 kids in the school district, which means you have a large number of families who have different priorities. And we have families that obviously feel that the health safety piece is the most critical, and we have families that feel the mental health piece is the most critical. So we continue to work very hard to balance both those and provide support at each area as best we can. So it's a balancing act, and of course we work with the experts in both areas to provide those supports. And with that being said, as we continue to move on, and before I leave the subject of COVID-19 and mental health, the CDC is ever changing the recommendations and directions for the school corporations across the country. And we're seeing more and more talk that getting back to in person is something that the CDC is leaning more towards every day. And as that occurs, we'll probably see that funnel through our state and county, which will then drive our decisions to hopefully go back in person sooner than later. As I shared, we will be working with all those involved to make a decision and share out on the 4th of February what we will do coming back on the 16th of February after that holiday break. Are there, Stacy, before I move on, are there any specific questions we haven't answered in regards to that? And I know some of them are being answered, you know, by individuals in type.
Yeah, there were a couple of them on there. One of them, I think Amy can answer on the antibody test and whether that allows you to come back.
I was actually working on that one right now. According to the Indiana Department of Health, we cannot accept antibody testing. The only testing that would keep a person from having to quarantine for close contact for 90 days would be an antigen test, which is the, people would be hearing it called like the rapid test or the PCR test. The antibody testing currently, they're not able to determine if that's showing that you have immunity. They're also not able to show that it's specifically this coronavirus that you have been exposed to. And so from that standpoint, they have said we should not be accepting antibody testing. So that's kind of the stance that we're doing with that. I'd also like to point out, I know more and more people are going to be getting vaccinated. It doesn't really affect our kids yet. But at this time, the health department is also stating that even if you have both doses of the vaccine, you would still need to quarantine if you had close contact. The hope is as we get more studies and they study it more with the vaccines and things, that process will change. But as of last Friday, at least in the webinar, that was what they pointed out. So.
Thank you. Thank you. I think one other question I see here I kind of wanted to jump into is, you know, it ends with, is mental health referendum, should it be revisited? Boy, that's an excellent question, something we've debated quite a bit. One of the things about referendums is it needs a lot of community support. It needs to be run by the community more than by the school district. It's called a PAC, a Political Action Committee. If it is something that folks want to revisit again, it's definitely needs to be a grassroots effort that comes from within the community for folks that want to try that again, would need to work with the school board and put together folks that would be willing to put in the efforts for that. And believe me, it is a big job. It's a big task to do, but definitely open to hearing anyone that would like to talk more about that. Any other questions on COVID-19 mental health? Anything there, Stacy? No? Okay. Another topic for us that we've been working on is our diversity, our work on, if you want to go to the next slide, Stacy. Basically, our cultural diversity work. We have been working, for those of you that have attended some coffee chats in the past, you know that I've shared that we've been working with Dr. Renee Aziz. She is an expert in the area of cultural diversity and working with school districts and other organizations across the state of Indiana. And so we've engaged with her along with many other schools. And in our county, I know that Franklin Community Schools has also engaged in working with her. And so Dr. Long, who is heading up this process, if you want to share a little bit, Bill, about like where we're at and what we're doing in regards to this work.
Sure, we're still in the planning process with Dr. Aziz. We had probably an hour or so long conversation earlier this week, and I think we have a great plan. And you know, her plan and what she has done in other school corporations and school communities is to work with the top leadership team and to see where we are and to do some training with us, and then that will allow us to then do some training with our principals and our assistant principals, and then at the end of that, we'll kind of do a survey and work with our parent community to to kind of gauge, say, here's where we think we are. Are we missing anything? Is there something else that we need to review or look at or change? And we're really excited. We're real lucky to get to work with Dr. Aziz. She's extremely busy as a consultant for the Department of Education and the Indiana Department of Education. So we feel very fortunate to have an opportunity to work with her, and honestly really excited about some of the things that we've talked about. We're gonna review our policies. We're gonna do book studies with our admin team and our leadership team, and work with our school board to make sure that we have a good mindset of where we want to go and what we want to do. I think that kind of covers, Rich, what we've been talking about with Dr. Aziz.
Yes, yeah, well done. And we will be putting together a website. Stacy does a really nice job of that you'll be able to follow along in our process, our timeline and what we're doing. She'll also have, when and the time is appropriate for volunteers, that'll be a great area for folks to visit and sign up to volunteer. If you're interested, the first book that we're working on is Everyone Really Equal? An Introduction to Key Concepts in Social Justice Education, Multicultural Educational Series. And we have a couple of other items. Any questions? Do you see any questions regarding our cultural diversity work?
No, you answered the volunteer question, so.
Okay, good. Next, we have our next slide, I believe, Stacy, is a parent square. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, we've moved to Parent Square as our platform for communicating with our parents and staff. And you see the two QR codes right there, or the web address. So everyone is in the system, and all you have to do is go to that web address or download the app and enter in the parent email or staff email that you have in our Skyward system, and it will match it up with your students, and you will be able to control your notifications, what kind of things you receive from the school district and how. So it's very simple. They'll prompt you to answer or to create a password the first time that you log in. The nice thing is, for our families who have English as a second language, you can choose your preferred language and it translates for you. There's also some real-time chat features with teachers that it will chat back and forth. So that's a really, that was a real big bonus for us on this. You can also choose your notifications. So if you get way too much email and you want to turn off the email notifications, you can turn those off for anything except an emergency. You're not allowed to turn those off. If you prefer to get messages via text, you can choose that option, or there's an app notification that you can choose. You can also choose to receive them kind of like with our Peach Jar flyers. You can choose digest, which means you just get one big group of emails or text messages at the end of the day. It will link you to whatever is in your Parent Square account. And like I said, emergency alerts can't be turned off. So we're encouraging parents, I'll go back to the QR code, to go ahead and download that, and kind of allows you to control how you're getting messages from the school. I know sometimes you'll get something from the district and from your school and from your student's teacher, and sometimes it can seem like a lot, and sometimes it's difficult to find those things. So we're hoping this will make it a little more clear and sort everything out.
Great. Did we get all those answered? Okay, so some important dates to know. I would like everyone to know the kindergarten and new student enrollment opens February 1st. That's really important. This helps us with staffing. This helps us with planning. So our kindergarten numbers are our biggest unknown. So as early as possible for us to know those numbers helps us plan and hire staff. The more students that are registered and the earlier they are, the earlier we can start hiring staff. And that's important because right now it's very competitive out there to hire teaching staff. And the earlier we can get on it, the better off we are, and obviously the better quality candidates that we get. So that's a big date to remember. So tell your friends and family, make sure everyone knows about that date. Some other important dates are our transfer windows. So on April 4th through April 9th, we have our intra-district transfers. That's within the district, folks that want to go, if they are within one particular school and want to go to another, they need to fill out the inter-district transfers. And then on April 18th through May 3rd is the inter-district transfers. Those are the out-of-district, basically. Those folks that would like to come to Center Grove that don't live in the district. And that's a pretty tight window, as well as very much subject to what vacancies we have in each grade level. So it's very grade level specific and school specific. And so it's a hard one for folks to actually get in, just due to the number of students and the growth we have. A couple of things here you'll see is additional information on all of what we shared today. You can go to these links and dig into more of what we shared. Should address a lot of your questions in regards to that. I do see, before we move off of any of this, I do see that we have some questions regarding some neighborhoods and growth and so forth, and we'll address those in here in just a minute. But I want to make sure before we move past anything COVID related or Parent Square or mental health that we've answered those questions. And Stacy, do we have any questions on that? Are we good?
There was just one question about Parent Square and will it come labeled as from Skyward? I think it's actually says it's from Parent Square, so you should be able to tell. I know the schools, especially the high school, they like to include the students on the message, and you can't do that through Parent Square yet. We'll be adding what's called Student Square in the next few months, and so that will allow them to migrate all of their communication instead of putting it in two places. But we're getting there. We're rolling it out, but for right now, it's you might be getting from both.
Yes, thank you. The other question is, will future CDC guidance weigh more heavily than county health department guidance? And I kind of answered that in the sense that we work with the county health department, and we'll take the majority of lead from them. And I know that they pretty much follow the CDC, so I think it'll go pretty much hand in hand.
And they follow the state, right, Amy? I think they're in pretty close communication with them.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, most of everything that the state is doing, it aligns with what the CDC has said. I think where things get a little more murky is with the alternative options for quarantine and what that kind of looks like. I know many people who have contacted me, their belief is that the CDC has kind of done away with the 14-day quarantine, and that's not actually the case. They actually recommend the 14-day quarantine above all else. They just realize that the impact on people being able to return to work and continue their livelihoods makes that a little bit more difficult. So there's a little bit more wiggle room, I think, with that. I think the bigger issue is that there's some additional components to that from a school standpoint, trying to ensure that we are able to monitor those things as well at school makes it a little bit more complicated, which is why we haven't shifted to 10 at this point.
Thank you, Amy. Okay, I see here we have a handful of questions regarding growth in the district, and particularly some neighborhoods going up here and there. I'll start by reminding everyone that we do have a Vision 10,000 page. We've shared that out quite a bit in regards to our growth, and it's just basically our website / Vision 10,000, correct, Stacy? Yeah. And in fact, I think I'm not sure if I can share yet my screen.
Hey, Rich, while you're looking that up, I'd talk a little bit. We,
yeah.
We get information from the city of Greenwood and Johnson County and Bargersville anytime there's a planned new subdivision. We're on the technical review committee, so we usually even know when we'll say like a Lennar or a big housing company purchases some land with the intent of building. We usually know as soon as the county knows. They share that information with us. We get an opportunity to provide input to them during the planning phase. So and then we've had we've used cooperative strategies to do a study for us, and I think that's sort of what you're going to refer to here in a minute. Is so we have a pretty good idea, as well as we can. An idea of what our growth is going to be, and really kind of where our growth is going to be. So we feel our partnership with the government agencies around us is pretty good, that there hasn't been anything that's surprised us. So I stalled long enough for you to get your website up.
You've got it out. Can everyone see it then? I think, yeah. So good, I got my screen share going in. Again, this is our Vision 10,000 page. We've been working on this for many, many years. The school corporation, the school board does a really good job of being proactive as far as managing growth in the district and being good stewards of our tax dollars. If you look at this website, you'll be able to see how our growth is managed, and particularly for example, here in August 19th, when we opened up Walnut Grove and our enrollment. And as we continue to go on, you see we are constantly working to manage our debt, improve our buildings, keep them up to date. We are in the renovation process for Pleasant Grove and Sugar Grove. Both those projects are getting ready to go underway and renovate those buildings and in some renovations, that's adding classroom space. So both these buildings will be adding some significant classroom space to Pleasant Grove and Sugar Grove. As you know, we've already done that with Center Grove Elementary and North Grove Elementary. And believe it or not, Maple Grove is getting ready to be renovated as well. It used to be our newest building, and now that's Walnut Grove. So we continue on into 2020. We'll be looking at our future growth to take us just below 9,000 students. So we'll be looking at renovations to Middle School North, along with adding additional staff. And of course, our student projections will be over 9,000 by 2021. At that point, we are also then renovating and expanding both middle schools. Now, this is a bit of a change in our plan. We originally thought that we would be adding a third middle school. But as Dr. Long explained, we've been working with demographers and also with cooperative strategies on our long-range plan, and particularly our student growth. That student growth shows us leveling out at around 2054, and in 2054 we will start to go back down. That sounds like a long time away, but if we think about it, the people that made decisions 20 and 30 years ago in order for us to open up Middle School North and Middle School Central were really careful about building anything that the school district would outgrow. And that became our concern with building a third middle school. Building a third middle school would only be a temporary need for a very short time, and then the district would start to shrink down at the middle school level, which means we would have a huge building that probably cost us over $200 million or more to build. That we would not have a need for. Not only that, we'd also have a large number of staff that we wouldn't need to continue to support that building. So we went back and looked at what would be a better long-range solution, and that is the renovation and expansion of both middle schools. that'll take both middle schools up to about 1,500 students. That's today they're each at about 1,000 or a little over. So it's not an extremely large increase to both middle schools and very well manageable, and something common across the state as far as the number of students in middle schools. And then finally, as we continue to grow, we look at what renovations and increased classrooms to the high school that we might need to do. As of today, we are in the process of renovating and adding classrooms to the high school, which we believe will get us down the road quite a ways. So we're at this point, we're looking at possibly March of 2023, starting to talk about doing some work on the high school. But at this point, we're not ready to really move forward on that. And you can get in here and play with this, and it goes out to and keeps taking us all the way out past 10,000 students and what we're doing for that. So then the questions around the new subdivisions, as Dr. Long shared, we are part of those, but as a public school entity, we have the responsibility to adjust to the community and provide schools. And whether that's redistricting, whether that's adding new schools, whatever it is, that's our obligation as a public entity. We do not have the luxury to say, no, you can't build any more neighborhoods, and no, we're not going to provide any more school. We've got too many kids, stay away. We just don't have that ability. And as far as traffic flow goes, we often share with the county highway department our concerns about traffic and about road conditions. But again, we're just another entity that also shares out our concerns and asks for work to be done on those roads. For example, it would definitely be beneficial if Stone's Crossing was wider all the way up to 135. We all feel that way, but that's not something that the school district can do. Also, when work's being done, like the median put in Whiteman Road, that was not something that we would have recommended. In fact, we would prefer it not be there. So those are just some examples of things that as a school district, we really don't have much control over. We can speak our minds, which Dr. Long is the lucky one that gets to go to all of those meetings, and he does a really good job of really arguing our points as a school district. But overall, in regards to, I live in Brent Ridge, and I know about the neighborhood that's coming up beside us. Its growth. There's not really anything particularly that we can do to stop something like that. As long as they are meeting all the requirements set forth by the drainage board and the highway department, those developers will probably get approved by the zoning boards and so forth. Am I leaving anything out on that, Bill, Stacy? I address everything there?
I don't think so. I'm just reading the questions. And
yeah, I'm not sure if I answered them all. I know both of you have probably read through those. Part of the question, I believe, was one about redistricting, and it's an obligation of the school district to do what we have to in order to adjust for class or for enrollment, and that is something that we do every few years. As we start to move towards building another school, we actually have still enough space in Walnut Grove that will probably allow us to redistrict a little bit before having to build another elementary. And that puts us out at this day and time, I think our elementary, do you remember, Bill? That's quite a ways out there, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty far. I was reading, there's a question about, are we still planning to build a new elementary in 2024? And I don't recall that ever being part of the plan in 2024 anyway. So no, that's not on our long range plan to start in 2024 for an elementary school.
Yeah, no. There was a question about purchasing land. We did sell land next to Sugar Grove, and we're using that money to buy land for a new elementary in the future. But right now, we're still working on what is that best location to build that next elementary. And if you're not in the know, you can drive around and look and see all the housing that's going up around the district. You can see it's just everywhere, and particularly the south continues to grow. And there is another housing addition that I believe has been approved at the corner of Honey Creek and Whiteland Road. It's down south of
Whiteland
our
and
south.
135.
At Whiteland 135, thank
Right.
you. Yeah, and I
About
believe that's what
600 houses.
600 houses. So that's going to impact where we build that next elementary as well. As you can see, that one's coming in as well. There's a question about what about a freshman center? We have looked at freshman centers and senior centers. Those are things that we've talked about, but it actually works better. Our decision to stay with a 9 through 12 high school works better with staffing, and which helps us provide, staff in a more fiscally responsible way for the entire corporation. We don't have to double hire positions. If we start splitting out freshmen or seniors, sometimes that can create a need to hire additional staff that duplicate. So we've looked at that, and at this point, we're able to take the high school all the way out to around 3,800 without having to split into any type of program of freshman center or senior center. Is there anything else? Okay, I think we answered those questions. Stacy, anything? Is there any other questions, folks? Please pop those in. If not, we'll go ahead and wrap it up today. Again, if you would go to the Vision 10,000 website, see that you can see a lot of information if you dig in there, as I'm kind of showing you, not just this timeline here, but of course these presentations that you can link into and see what we've been working on. Okay, well, I think we might, do we have one more question? I believe that is the correct email. Is that right, Stacy? The communications, yes. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to stop sharing that. Again, thank you everyone for attending today. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for being here this morning and answering questions. We wish you all, to stay healthy and safe, and we know that we'll continue to get through this together. I appreciate all the work of our staff, and I will tell you, being in all of our buildings on a regular basis, I'm just amazed at how well our students are handling wearing masks all day, our staff handling wearing masks all day, and really we've got good kids, and we've got great staff, and we're really blessed as a school district. It's going very well. So I just want to thank everyone in all your efforts in doing that. Stay healthy, and we will see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you.